Coming up, Secretary Granholm delves into energy and investing in tribal nations. Plus, mother and activist Danielle C Walker explains her stories called The Red Road. And Dakota McDowell Wapakichi shares his reporting from Washington, D.C. I'm Aaliyah Chavez. Join us for those interviews plus headlines from the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Arizona State University welcomes 3,500 Indigenous students from Arizona and across the nation. It serves one of the largest populations of Indigenous students among U.S. colleges and universities. We created a sense of place for tribal nations to create futures of their own making through community outreach and research, taught by world-class Indigenous faculty where they see a reflection of themselves and their experiences. Find community at ASU.
Amarawa Hopa. Thank you for joining us. We begin today in Oklahoma, where tribal nations are celebrating a major legislative win. This story began earlier this year when the state's legislature approved a bill permitting Native American students to wear traditional regalia at graduations. When the bill arrived on the desk of Governor Kevin Stitt in late May, he rejected the bill through a veto, saying a decision on regalia should be up to school districts. That caused the bill to go back to the state legislature, where just last week, lawmakers voted to override the governor's rejection. The law will now take effect on July 1st. It allows students to wear traditional garments, jewelry, or other adornments, and it prohibits any weapons like bows, arrows, or tomahawks. Tribal leaders and Native organizations around the country weighed in, saying they support the new policy. Oklahoma has around 130,000 Native American students in grades K through 12. Well, efforts to expand broadband access across tribal lands has received new funding from the Office of Indian Economic Development. The agency recently awarded $2.7 million in national tribal broadband grants to 18 tribes and tribal organizations. It provides funds for tribes to explore developing or extending broadband services in their communities. The opportunity is also hoping to promote financial independence and commercial activity in addition to closing the digital divide. The 2-year grants range from $120,000 to $175,000 and will fund feasibility studies for the broadband expansion projects. It has been decades in the making. The Oglala Lakota Art Space had its grand opening on May 20th to honor artists and welcome the community to this unique space. ICT's Shirley Snavy has the story.
It started as a dream in the 1980s to build a place where artists could come and create. The building itself honors traditional Lakota culture.
This is a special building that was designed by architect Tammy Eaglebull, who's also a member of Pine Ridge here, Oglala Lakota Nation. Designed and inspired by the Lakota Star Knowledge. And so out front we have a community artist collaboration that talks about the Lakota Star Knowledge and incorporated a design at the front, and so the whole building is sort of designed with that inspiration.
Leslie Mesteff is the building's manager.
It's a partnership with First Peoples Fund and Art Space and the Lakota Fund and the Lakota Credit Union.
Kelly Lindquist from ArtSpace is one of the partners.
Through that that's the best way to do it, organic, slow process, which a turning point was when Lori contacted the University in Colorado that went ahead and did the market study about 15 years ago.
My Uncle Richard did a research study through the Aspen Institute, and it was around the flow of funds and how money's distributed in local economies. 97 cents of the dollar was being circulated outside of this local economy. So that's why Lakota Funds was born here on Pine Ridge, to just help build business. And Ivan Sorbo from the Pine Ridge Area Chamber of Commerce, who we've also been working with for a very long time, You know, he said there was over 700 and some businesses now here, I believe, on Pine Ridge. So, you know, that trajectory is a contribution of everybody, right, in terms of even the trajectory of the work with First Peoples Fund. So we had enough data, you know, in advance to know why we should do the work we're doing at First Peoples Fund.
Oglala Lakota Art Space brings the generations together, particularly the youth.
Actually opening up, they're opening their heart to you, they're opening their soul and spirit to you and showing it to you in this light, whether it be they're talking about their trauma or talking about their community or talking about their culture or talking about like generational trauma, whatever it is, we find it important and it's something that they want to let out there. So we always want to make sure that we have a safe space for them to be able to know that they're safe here.
In Kyle, South Dakota, Shirley Snavy, ICT News.
Moving to the north, an Alaska Native politician is running for a new and important position that pays more than $265,000 a year. Alaska State Representative Josiah Patkatuk announced his candidacy to become the next mayor of the North Slope Borough. The current mayor, Harry Brower Jr., cannot run again due to term limits. Patkatuk, who is Inupiaq, appears to be running unopposed and says he is prepared to resign his seat in the state's legislature if he is elected. The North Slope Borough is home to large oil fields, including the controversial Willow Project. It has an operating budget of over $300 million, with the mayor having significant control over how and where the money is spent. Patkatuk, who is an independent, previously served on the North Slope Borough Assembly before running for state office in 2020. Election Day will be on October 3rd. And those are the headlines for the ICT Newscast. The Department of Energy and the Biden administration have many initiatives dedicated to improving energy infrastructure. U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm visited Phoenix recently to share the agency's latest efforts concerning tribal nations. ICT's McKenzie Allen-Charmley has this interview with the Secretary.
Well, U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, thank you so much for joining us today.
Of course.
To start, I was hoping you could give us an overview of the state of energy in tribal communities.
Well, first of all, tribal communities have the potential for huge clean energy generation. And historically, many tribes have obviously been energy generators, but in fossil fuel, in coal, for example. We want to help tribes to be able to lead in energy in the 21st century by providing some additional assistance and resources. Big challenge is that many tribal communities, there may be up to 30% of their people who don't even have access to electricity, even though they've been energy generating. So we want to help both those individual families and we want to help the tribes economically live up to the potential that they have and that their aspirations are seeking.
There's an initiative in particular, energy justice, that I was hoping you could touch on as it concerns tribal communities.
Well, in particular with tribal communities, because there has been so much injustice in the past. It's one of the first executive order that the president signed was an order that was focused on justice and on energy justice for the Department of Energy. We have been totally focused on getting 40% of the benefits of these clean energy investments to communities that have been disadvantaged. That includes tribes, but also communities of color, disadvantaged communities. And so we've really crafted the policies to be able to incentivize investment and partnership where communities have been hurting. And so that's why this partnership with tribes and being at the table together and negotiating nation to nation and respecting the tribes is so much infused in how we are going forward. Tribes, because of the lands that they have, can be huge partners if they choose to in this clean energy future, and we'd love to see those investments go to the tribes.
There's a term I've heard over and over again and emphasized, which is energy resilience. How does that coincide or work with energy or tribal energy sovereignty?
Yeah, really important, because energy resilience really refers to the ability of people to access energy, and so much energy right now is impeded by these extreme weather events, for example. If you've got, whether it's hurricanes or heat waves or wildfires or droughts, that makes it very difficult to access energy. And so we want to invest in the solutions that allow for tribes to be able to anticipate, respond, but also make sure their energy systems that currently exist are strong. So for example, undergrounding wires is very important, especially in areas that are extremely prone to wildfires or excessive heat. That's one aspect of energy resilience that we want to encourage. Making sure that energy systems themselves are not old, antiquated, and broken. And while we often think about the future, which is very important in building new systems, we also have to realize people are relying upon systems that were built decades and decades ago that are not working well. And so shoring up the existing infrastructure, even as we think about building into the future, all part of energy resilience in an era of extreme climate events.
With these clean energy solutions, visually, what can tribal community members or citizens see as in terms of what this will bring to the economy?
Well, first of all, I think that there's huge opportunity for economic benefit of tribes if they are partners in generating energy for the tribes, but also for export to surrounding areas, to surrounding states. They can charge for that. That can be a means of economic benefit. Maybe tribes might be interested in attracting, for example, the manufacturing facilities associated with building solar panels, putting people to work. The tribal lands themselves can offer huge benefit to many of these manufacturers. And if they are manufacturing on site, this is true for wind as well, wind turbines. Many tribal lands have great wind potential as well. It's true for geothermal, huge geothermal in many places in the West. So tribes can see if there's a good strategic plan, tribes would be able to take advantage of this in both manufacturing as well as in generating, and I will say also in making sure that we've got transmission across tribal lands, which also is job creating as well.
And finally, what does the future of energy look like for tribal nations?
Our goal on the federal government is to get to 100% clean electricity by 2035. Many tribes have similar goals, and some not so much. We would love to partner with our fellow nations to be able to get to that goal for both jobs, for energy security, and for Mother Earth, which we all share. The climate should be an existential crisis for everyone, and we've all got to do our part to ensure that we combat climate change.
Well, U.S. Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, thank you so much.
You bet.
Danielle C Walker holds many titles, including being a mother, artist, and businesswoman. She's also a member of the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Relatives Task Force of Colorado and a commissioner for the Denver American Indian Commission. ICT's Stewart Huntington caught up with her recently.
Danielle, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome to ICT. Danielle, you've been working for many years on a very interesting project, the Red Road Project. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, the Red Road Project started between myself and a friend of mine in 2013, so it's been a decade already, as sort of a way to tell stories of Native people living and contributing actively to our societies today, and giving them a platform to kind of use their own voice and highlight great stories that people are doing around Indian country that highlight the resilience, the positivity, things like that. And it always seemed to be an outsider looking in, telling our stories for us. And so that kind of led to the development of the Red Road Project. And after that conversation, my friend and I booked flights to North Dakota, back to where I come from, and started the project a month later. And it's been 10 years, and we've traveled all over Indian country, talking to youth and elders, and again, every which way between, highlighting their stories and what they're doing to actively keep their cultures alive, whether they're language warriors, artists, doctors, activists, et cetera. And we're allowing them to sort of tell their own stories in their own words, through video, through film, and documented stories.
Is there any particular story that you've touched on recently, or one that stands out from your work?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be, I'm already sort of neck deep in the next sort of chapter or phase of the Red Road Project, and it's all about highlighting urban natives, specifically as it relates to the Urban Indian Relocation Act that the federal government had put in place in the 50s and 60s to relocate Native people off the reservations and bring them to urban areas with promises of like American dream life. But it really proved to be just another attempt at assimilation and cultural genocide that failed very fast. But today we're left with a lot of pockets around the country, like Denver, like Los Angeles, Chicago, where there's a high population of Pan American Indians living in these areas. And Denver was was actually the headquarters of that program at one point, and that's where I live today. And so I'm sort of uncovering that history and really just telling that story, because a lot of people in Colorado don't realize that that's a big, significant part of the history there.
And that seems like a natural overlap with your role as a commissioner on the Denver American Indian Commission.
Yeah, I've been part of the Denver American Indian Commission, which is an appointed position through the mayor's office since 2018, I believe, and led that as co-chair for the past 2 years. And that's such a great group of Native people who want to be involved and be a liaison between the city and the urban areas and the Native community. So we get tasked or asked a lot of questions about renaming of assets like public parks, or talking about statues that may or may not be derogatory to Native people. So, and that's, just a couple examples, but there's a lot of different things that we're able to be involved with to help sort of guide and be a liaison between the community and the city.
You do a lot of mural work, and I saw one of your murals was dedicated to the women of AIM. Do you get inspired by those women?
I do. I get inspired by my own peers, people that had lived before me, generations before me, my elders. So I did do that mural a couple years ago, and it was sort of is an inspiration because during that time of that era in the 60s and 70s, the men seemed to be sort of highlighted, and what their work was, and they were kind of the face of the American Indian movement at that time. And I just know, having relatives that were part of that movement at that time, being women, that they had such an influence and such a strong position within that movement, and they never really got the opportunity to be highlighted or kind of have their stories told. So I wanted to kind of do that mural to dedicate to the women that had made such strong change to our communities.
Danielle, you're also an author. Tell us about Still Here.
Yeah, so that was sort of a pet project I did during lockdown in 2020. It was always something that I wanted to do, was to write a book. I had been asked through different ways, through the Red Road Project, actually, when I'd go into museums or libraries or institutions, universities, et cetera, and give talks about the Red Road Project, a lot of educators would come up to me and my partner on the project and ask if we had curriculum, if there was any type of educational materials that they could utilize in the classroom, because it was such a fresh perspective to talk about Native people as we exist today, here and now in the contemporary time. So yes, long story short, I did do this book, and it touches on so many different topics, from colonization to what is a reservation, to missing and murdered Indigenous relatives and some of the activism that's taking place today, et cetera.
You mentioned missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. You worked to help Colorado pass its MMIR Act.
Yes, myself as well as another kind of tight group of women in the Native American community in Colorado got together after successfully having other legislation passed in the state of Colorado that directly affects Native people. And we said, what about the MMIW or MMIWGS, or, there's a lot of ways that people brand it, but we thought missing and murdered Indigenous relatives was a good way to call it, because we realized it's not just women that are being affected by this crisis, but all genders. And so we worked with state legislators to help put together this bill in 2022. and successfully passed it, where it created an office for missing and murdered Indigenous relatives in the Department of Public Safety for the state of Colorado, and be able to kind of work and specifically help those particular cases. And with that came the Missing Indigenous Persons Alert, similar to kind of like an Amber Alert. When a missing person identified as Indigenous goes missing, that alert will go out statewide as well.
Congratulations on that successful effort. And Danielle, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
ICT has developed a number of partnerships with colleges and universities across the country. One of them is Gaylord College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Oklahoma. Dakota McDowell Wapakichi is one of the journalists we've had the pleasure to work with over the years. He's now the Washington correspondent for Gaylord News. Welcome back, Dakota.
Thanks for having me, Leah. It's good to see you again.
Tell us about your position in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so I got selected as one of the Washington correspondents. There's 3 of us, and we're up here in Washington, D.C., reporting on anything related to Oklahoma. Specifically for me, my goal was to come here and report on a bunch of Indigenous related stories. So anything related to the BIA, BIE, Indian Affairs committees, anything like that. So it's been awesome just be able to have that opportunity and come up here and do that.
What kinds of stories have you covered so far?
Well, I was working on one about the BIA budget and what that could mean for the fiscal year of 2024. And then actually today, on Monday, I will be going to the White House to cover the Kansas City Chiefs coming to town. So Creed Humphrey, a citizen Potawatomi Nation, tribal citizen, will be there. And then you have James Winchester, who's Choctaw. He'll be there. So it's pretty cool to be able to cover stuff like that.
Especially because you've done a lot of freelance work for us, including the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's really cool to be able to go down to Phoenix, Arizona for that opportunity and meet some of those people and report on some stories that maybe wouldn't be reported on like a local TV station, Oklahoma City or Phoenix. It's cool to share those stories because they don't go all over the place all that much.
Given that you're in Washington, D.C. and wanting to cover stories about Indigenous communities and specifically about Oklahoma, I'm wondering how deeply you plan to cover Senator Markwayne Mullin.
Pretty good. I met him on my first day here. He was very open arm, invited us to his office. And, him being Cherokee, actually this Wednesday, there is a Senate Indian Affairs Committee hearing on the Truth and Healing Commission, and so I'm going to go cover that, and he'll be there voting on the resolution there, that Senate bill. So hopefully being able to get something out of him, and him being Cherokee is also big. And I've been covering some of Tom Cole. He's in the House of Representatives, and having that tribal representation is pretty good, and reporting on that is awesome.
I'm really curious about your decision to pursue a career in journalism. What was your initial inspiration for entering this industry?
Well, I was 8 years old watching News 9 in Oklahoma City and some tornado coverage, and it was really important because they would share some stuff like, it's here, you need to take shelter. And I'm not much of a meteorologist, but I love being able to serve people and kind of just tell them about what's going on and maybe even share their story. And so I told myself that I wanted to get into that. And for 2 years, I went to a smaller school, but then I decided I wanted to go a little bit bigger and go to the University of Oklahoma. And I've had so many opportunities to be able to do what I love, and I could not be more appreciative of them and appreciative of ICT.
As journalists, we all have beats or topics that really interest us. I know mine is politics. What is yours?
Well, mine's definitely just on more general Native American reporting at Gaylord College right now. I'm one of the Native American students that are around, and actually I just had a friend who graduated, so that number's gone down just a little bit. But that's kind of my beat. I report on anything that comes up with that. I've dipped into politics a little bit with this past election season in Oklahoma, reporting on Governor Stitt or Senator Markwayne Mullin, a bunch of those guys. So anything that revolves around Native Americans, I love it. Whatever tribe, I love being able to expand my horizon besides mine, the Kickapoo tribe and the Absentee Shawnee tribes.
Maybe talk about what kinds of experiences you've had at Gaylord College in terms of being able to reach for more opportunities than the typical, student journalist would get.
Yeah, so my first month there, I stepped out of my comfort zone when they needed somebody to go cover on the Julius Jones situation in Oklahoma in late 2021. And so I was able to go report on that, and it was really cool just being behind the scenes, following along with some people. And Gaylord College has been able to let me go to that. And it was kind of out of the blue because I'd only been there for a month, but I told them, let me have an opportunity and I'll show you that I'm going to work hard for it. And so not only that, but I've also reported, like I said, on the election season and going down to the Super Bowl. And Gaylord even knows that I skipped some school to go cover the Tribal Nations Summit here in Washington, D.C. last December. But they love that. They're all about supporting more coverage of stories that wouldn't be covered.
Dakota, so often we have middle school or high school students who watch this newscast. For those who are coming up and maybe thinking about journalism as a career, what would be your selling pitch in terms of why they should all become journalists?
Well, first, I'd say on the service side, you're doing something that in the long term, you're giving back to your people. I love being able to report on my tribe, but even then, there are so many other tribes in Oklahoma that, they have a news source, but they don't get to be on it as much. And so my first selling point is you're doing a service to so many different people, not just your community, and you're representing well to your community. The second kind of thing is you get to go to so many cool opportunities and be able to meet so many people. So it's a really cool personal thing on that side that, I got to cover President Joe Biden when I was at the Tribal Nations Summit. I'm 22. I just turned 22 2 days before that. Like, that was really cool.
Well, Dakota McDowell Wapakishi, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Leah.
And that's a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.